the afternoon my son-in-law stepped into my living room, picked up the remote from the arm of my chair, and told me I would be more comfortable upstairs. I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not the silence of shock, the silence of a woman who has finally heard, clearly and completely, what has been building for 3 years. I had been sitting in that chair since my husband passed. It was positioned by the front window, angled just right to catch the afternoon light in winter, when everything outside turns the color of old bone and the days get short. I had bought it myself the year we moved into the house, 22 years ago, from a shop on King Street that isn't there anymore. The fabric had worn smooth on the armrests. My hands knew every thread. My son-in-law did not look at the chair when he said it. He looked at the wall behind me, the way he always looked at things in this house. The way you calculate square footage. "We're turning this into more of an entertainment space," he said. His voice had that rehearsed steadiness he used when he wanted something to sound like a decision that had already been made. Leanne and I talked about it. The layout makes more sense for us. Your room upstairs has a perfectly good television. I turned to the kitchen doorway. My daughter was standing there with a dish towel in her hands, folding and unfolding it the way she did when she was 17 and didn't want to be called on in class. Our eyes met. I waited. One sentence, just one. "Mom, that's your chair. Mom, this is your house. Anything." Leanne looked down at the dish towel. That was enough. I stood up slowly. My right knee protested the way it has since a bad fall 4 winters ago, but I kept my face still. I walked to the front hall, took my coat from the hook, my coat, on my hook, in my house, and lifted my keys from the bowl by the door. The bowl my husband's mother had brought back from a trip to Prince Edward Island. A small red clay bowl, slightly uneven, handmade. I had been dropping my keys into it every day for 22 years. I looked at the bowl for just a moment, then I went outside. The late October air hit me like a decision. It smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the block. I walked to the end of the driveway, then kept walking. I did not look back at the house. I already knew what I would see. My son-in-law watching from the living room window. My daughter not watching at all. I called a cab from the corner. When it came, I gave the driver the name of a hotel downtown. Not the cheapest, not the fanciest, just a quiet place where I could think. What I want to say now, before I tell you what happened next, is this. I did not walk out because I was beaten. I walked out because I finally understood that staying was doing more damage than leaving ever could. I had let them move in 3 years earlier, in the spring, when my son-in-law had what he called an investment gap. He was in real estate, or that's what he told people. He flipped houses, or tried to. He talked about properties the way some men talk about horses they're about to bet on, with a kind of breathless certainty that made you feel slow for asking questions. Leanne had just moved back from Vancouver and was settling into a new accounting job in Guelph. It made sense, they said, to stay with me while they got sorted. 3 years of sorted. My grocery bill doubled. The hydro bill climbed every quarter. My car was borrowed just once, and then borrowed again without asking. My son-in-law's name began appearing on packages delivered to my address. His tools filled my garage. His voice filled my evenings, loud, certain, taking up all the air in any room he entered. And I had said nothing, or not enough. I had made gentle suggestions. I had lowered my own volume. I had watched the evening news on my phone instead of on the television because my son-in-law had things to catch up on. I had told myself it was temporary. I had told myself that patience was kindness. I had been wrong about that. The hotel room was clean and quiet in the way only neutral spaces can be. No history in the walls, no one else's choices in the furniture. I sat at the small desk by the window and opened the leather folder I had carried in from my bag. I keep important papers close, from years of working in a world where the right document at the right moment meant everything. I spent 28 years as a loans officer and then branch manager at a bank in this city. Not because banking is glamorous. It is not. But because I understood early that money has its own language, and people who can read it have a certain kind of freedom. I had seen families undone by a line of credit they didn't understand. I had watched inheritances become battlegrounds in ways that poisoned relationships for generations. I had learned very young in that career that paperwork does not lie, forgive, or forget. The deed to the house was in that folder. It had been in my name since we bought it. When my husband passed 2 years before my daughter and son-in-law arrived, I had updated all the estate documents carefully, methodically, the way I did everything. The house remained solely mine. I also had something else in that folder. Monthly bank statements I had been quietly printing for the past 8 months. Not because I had suspected anything specific, more because I had noticed things. My son-in-law's spending had never matched his income in any visible way. The kitchen renovation he had been planning since they arrived had never begun. He spoke about a property in Cambridge that was almost ready in exactly the same words he had used in February, then June, then September. 28 years in lending teaches you to recognize when someone is describing hope as though it were fact. I spread the statements on the hotel desk and looked at them clearly for the first time. Then I picked up my phone and called a woman I had worked across the hall from for 11 years before she left banking and moved into property law. Her name was Isabel. We had never been close, exactly. She was precise and a little formal, the kind of person who scheduled coffee rather than suggested it. But we had trusted each other professionally in the way that comes from watching someone do their work with integrity for a long time. She answered on the second ring. "It is late," she said, not unkindly. "Are you all right?" "I will be," I said, "but I need advice in the morning." I told her what had happened, not with drama. Just the facts in the order they occurred, the way I used to summarize a file for a senior officer. She listened without interrupting. "The house is still in your name," she said when I finished. "Sole owner, no cosigners, no transfers." "Then you already know what they are." "Occupants by consent," I said. "Not tenants, no lease, no tenancy agreement. The Residential Tenancies Act does not apply. The consent can be withdrawn." "It can," she said. "I will have my associate serve notice tomorrow morning. You do not need to be present. 60 days in Ontario for this kind of family situation, but we will have the paperwork airtight." "Good." She paused. "You understand this changes things with your daughter." "Things already changed," I said. "I have simply stopped pretending they haven't." After I hung up, I sat for a long time without moving. Outside, the city was doing what cities do at night, carrying on without awareness of any one person's grief. I did not feel victorious. I felt old in the best sense of the word, like someone who has finally put down a weight they should have set down years ago and is now noticing the strange lightness of their own arms. I slept until 7. The first time in longer than I could remember, that I had slept without listening for footsteps in the hall. By 9 in the morning, my phone had begun its work. My daughter called first. Her voice was high and tight, the way it got when something had moved past her ability to manage it calmly. "There's a man at the door," she said. "He has papers. He says he's here on behalf of your lawyer." I looked out the hotel window. Morning traffic. Someone walking a dog. A woman in a yellow jacket waiting at the light. "Yes," I said. "Take the papers, read them." "Mom," her voice dropped. "He's yelling. He wants to know what this is." "Tell him to read the papers. That will answer his questions." There was muffled noise, my son-in-law's voice rising and then breaking apart. And then my daughter came back on the line. "It says notice of termination of occupancy." She read it slowly, the way you read a prescription you don't recognize. 60 days. "That's correct." "You can't do this. This is our home, Mom." I let the words sit for a moment, not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. "It is the home I allowed you to stay in," I said. "That permission has ended." She started to say something else, but my son-in-law's voice came through again. Not words exactly, just volume. The particular noise he made when he felt the ground shifting under him. I heard him demand to know where I was, heard him say things about lawyers and respect, and how dare I do this without a conversation. And then I heard the rustle of paper as my daughter carried the notice somewhere quieter. "Tell him," I said when she came back, "that the man at the door is not the person to be angry with. He is delivering paper. The law is not attacking anyone. It is clarifying something that should have been clear from the beginning." I ended the call. I ordered breakfast in the hotel dining room: oatmeal, coffee, orange juice. I ate slowly and read the news on my phone, and when 3 messages arrived from my son-in-law in a row, I turned the phone face down and finished my meal. The second crack came at the grocery store. I know this because my daughter texted me at 10:40 with 2 words: "Card declined." I had closed the supplementary card the previous evening from the hotel room with 1 phone call. I had also contacted the utility companies to confirm that all billing would return directly to me. Small steps, methodical. I texted back, "I know." My son-in-law called 12 minutes later. I answered. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was controlled in the manner of a man who has just remembered he is in public. "That card is for the house, for groceries. This is insane. You have lived in my home for 3 years without contributing to the mortgage, the property tax, or the hydro bill," I said. "The card was a courtesy. Courtesies can be withdrawn. We are family." "Family," I said, "does not mean unlimited access to another person's finances without accountability. What you are feeling right now is not emergency. It is consequence." He was quiet, then more quietly, "You are going to regret this." "I considered that possibility last night," I said. "I decided I could live with it." I hung up. That afternoon, I asked Isabel to arrange a meeting. Not at the house, somewhere neutral, somewhere with a table and chairs and the kind of quiet that prevents people from making scenes. She said she knew a place. The conference room was on the 4th floor of a building on Wyndham Street, the kind of room that smells faintly of printer ink and has no decoration at all, just glass and the city and the flat morning light. I arrived early. I chose the seat at the far end of the table, back to the window where I could see the door. Isabel sat to my left, her files already arranged, reading glasses set precisely beside a yellow notepad. In front of me I placed 3 things only: my identification, the deed, and the folder I had assembled over 8 months. I had not originally intended to use that folder, but I had spent enough years reading financial documents to know what was inside it would matter. At 10 o'clock, the door opened. My son-in-law came in first, moving too quickly, shoulders set forward, jaw tight. His jacket was pressed, but his eyes were not. My daughter followed 2 steps behind, hands wrapped around the strap of her purse, as though it were the only solid thing left in her world. Neither of them looked at me right away. "There's no need for any of this," my son-in-law said, before he had even sat down. "We have rights here. We have lived in that house openly for 3 years. That counts for something legally." Isabel answered before I had to. "You were admitted to the property as licensees, not tenants. There was no lease agreement, no transfer of tenancy, and no payment of any kind. The Residential Tenancies Act does not apply to this situation. The notice is valid and procedurally correct. She's my mother-in-law." He spread his hands. "This is family." "The deed is registered in one name," Isabel said. "Everything else is a feeling." He turned to my daughter then. I recognized the look, the one that meant say something, back me up, make this stop. Leanne studied the surface of the table. That was my opening. "There are things I want you both to understand," I said, "and I think it will be easier if you see the full picture first." I laid the documents on the table. Bank statements, a home equity line of credit summary from a secondary lender, 2 notices from what appeared to be a private investor, a property record on the Cambridge project that my son-in-law had been describing as almost finished for 14 months. My daughter reached for the papers. Her eyes moved down the first page, then stopped. She turned to the second. The color in her face shifted. "This is a HELOC," she said softly. "Yes," I said. "Against what property?" "A property registered in your husband's name, taken out 16 months ago." I looked at my son-in-law. "According to the Municipal Building Permit Office, that property has been sitting with an incomplete foundation since April." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "The balance on the line of credit is just over $94,000, I continued. "There are 2 outstanding notices from a private investor totaling $31,000. The RRSP he mentioned cashing out last year shows a full withdrawal with no corresponding reinvestment." My daughter set the papers down. She was very still. "He told me we were saving," she said, not to me, to the space between herself and her husband. "The market was difficult," my son-in-law said. His voice had changed. The volume was the same, but the steadiness had gone out of it entirely. It was temporary. It would have turned around. "You used my home," I said quietly, "as a financial buffer while you concealed losses from your wife. You contributed nothing to the household, and when your situation became more precarious, you began treating my property as your own. I do not know whether you intended harm, but the outcome was the same either way." He said nothing. "The terms are as stated in the notice. 60 days. Utilities and accounts remain in my management. Any damage beyond normal wear will be addressed through the appropriate channels. And if there is any attempt to intimidate or interfere with me, everything in this folder goes to whoever needs to see it." My daughter's shoulders had begun to shake. Not with grief exactly, but with the particular trembling that happens when the story you have been telling yourself about your own life revises itself very quickly. I turned to her last. "What you do now is yours to decide," I said. "I am not here to tell you what to choose. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, I have not stopped being your mother. That is not something on the table. What I have taken off the table is the cost. I will not continue paying, in money or in dignity, for a situation I was never told was a debt. Isabel closed her folder. This meeting is concluded. I walked past my son-in-law on the way to the door. I did not stop. But I said quietly, not loudly, not performing for anyone, I mistook your confidence for competence. That was my error. I won't make it again. The door was heavy and closed without a sound. The fallout was exactly what Isabel had warned me to expect, and no worse. My son-in-law spent that afternoon attempting to reframe events in ways that placed him as the wronged party. By evening, the version he was telling did not survive contact with the documents he knew existed. Stories built on debt have a structural weakness. They collapse the moment someone asks to see the numbers. What I did not expect was my daughter's call at 6:30. I didn't get in his car, she said when I answered. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed. He wanted us to go to his parents' place together. He wanted a united front. She paused. I sat on the curb outside the building, and I just couldn't make myself stand up. Good, I said. I don't know what I'm doing. You're sitting on a curb, I said. That's enough for right now. She exhaled, a long, unsteady breath, the kind that comes at the end of a long hold. He says you destroyed our family. Your family was already in trouble, I said. I simply stopped being the reason it could continue as it was. After a silence, she asked whether I would still want her in my life if she left him. She asked it carefully, the way you ask something when the answer matters more than you know how to say. I will always be your mother, I said. That is not something you earn or lose. But I will not be your emergency exit from choices that are not mine to absorb. Both of those things can be true at the same time. She cried then. Properly. Not the thin, anxious kind she'd been doing for years, but the real kind. And when she was finished, she asked if I could help her find somewhere to live. You have a job, I said. You have a paycheck. You know how to open a bank account in your own name. Start there. 3 days later, she signed a lease on a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. Small kitchen, one large window, a radiator that knocked in the night. She called to tell me the amount of the first rent check and that she had written it with her own hand. And it felt, she said, like signing something that actually meant something. A week after that, she told me she had filed for divorce. She did not ask what I thought. She had already decided. Day 60 arrived on a Wednesday. I drove back to the house in the morning and parked at the corner while Isabel's associate handled the final walkthrough. I sat in my car with a coffee from Tim Hortons and a book I had been meaning to read since summer. My phone brought me 3 updates across the morning. They are loading the truck, 9:48 a.m. Keys surrendered at door, 11:15 a.m. Property clear. Minor scuffs in the hallway. Nothing structural, 11:50 a.m. I drove home. The gate opened the same as it always had. The lock turned without resistance, the way a lock does when it recognizes who is holding the key. Inside, the air was stale and close in the way of rooms that have been holding their breath. The living room looked larger without my son-in-law's sectional filling it. The television he had mounted on my wall had left 2 holes in the drywall and a pale rectangle where the bracket had been. I opened every window. The October air moved through the rooms slowly, the way air moves in old houses that remember their own histories. I put the kettle on. I got a bucket, filled it with warm water, and a splash of the cedar-scented cleaner I have used since before my daughter was born, and I started with the floors. There is a kind of work that is not really about the task. It is about reclaiming something through the act of doing it. I did not listen to anything while I cleaned. No radio, no podcast, just the sound of the water, and the cloth on the baseboards, and the light moving across the floors as the afternoon came in. The painter arrived the following morning. He was a quiet man named Andre, who had painted the exterior 5 years ago, and who worked with the same unhurried precision I have always respected in anyone. I chose the color without hesitation, a warm ivory, almost cream, not quite yellow, the color of certain late afternoon light in November when the sun sits low and turns everything it touches generous. By evening, the living room was changed, not dramatically, just returned. I brought my chair back from the upstairs bedroom where I had moved it 18 months ago to make space for a reading lamp that was never mine. I set it in its place by the window. I put the small side table beside it, and the lamp with the amber shade. I made tea in the blue pot and sat down. Outside, the street went on in its ordinary way. Inside, for the first time in 3 years, there was no sound I was waiting for, and no sound I was dreading. The first Wednesday tea was 4 weeks later. I did not plan it as anything important. I mentioned it to 2 neighbors, who mentioned it to others, and by the morning of the gathering, I had 7 women arriving, aged between 61 and 78, most of whom I knew only well enough to wave to from the driveway. They came in with the careful energy of people who are slightly unused to being invited anywhere. They sat at the table. They ate the butter tarts I had made the day before, and drank tea from the blue pot and the yellow pot and the old speckled one I keep for large company. The questions came softly, as they always do when people have been carrying them alone for a long time. "My son has been asking to be added to the deed," said the woman to my left, a retired schoolteacher named Hilda. "He says it will make estate matters simpler." "My daughter wants to manage my accounts," said another. "She says I shouldn't have to deal with the bank anymore." "They say it's temporary," said a third, and the words sat in the room for a moment before anyone spoke again. I looked around the table. "Ownership is not the same as love," I said. "If you want to leave something behind, write a will. While you are alive, your house is your house. Your account is your account. Love does not require a signature, and anyone who tells you differently is telling you something about what they want from you, not about what they feel for you." The room went quiet. Then pens came out. Someone asked for Isabel's number. Someone else asked about the difference between power of attorney and joint ownership. We talked for 2 hours, and when everyone left, I stood in the front hall and felt the particular satisfaction of a room that had held something useful. My daughter came by later that evening, knocking lightly and waiting to be invited in the way you do when you understand you are visiting someone else's home. She no longer had a key. She did not need one. She looked around the room. The ivory walls, the chair by the window, the stillness of a space that was no longer bracing itself. "It feels different in here," she said. "It is different," I said. We sat at the table with 2 cups between us. She told me about her apartment, about learning to budget for groceries on her own, about the odd satisfaction of paying her own phone bill for the first time, about how strange and solid it felt to spend money she had earned herself on a life she had made herself. She laughed once, a surprised sound. describing the way her radiator knocked at 3 in the morning. When she left, I stood alone in the living room and picked up the remote from the arm of my chair. Just plastic and a few buttons. Nothing powerful about it at all. I turned on the evening news. Volume at exactly where I liked it. I sat back, and the chair held me the way it always had, and the news went on, and the room asked nothing from me except to be present in it. What I have come to understand on the other side of all this is something I wish I had known much earlier. Helping someone should never cost you your name on your own deed. Kindness does not mean making yourself smaller until there is nothing left of you in your own rooms. And patience, real patience, the honest kind, is not the same as permission. For 3 years, I chose quiet over clarity. I told myself it was grace. It was not grace. It was fear wearing grace like a borrowed coat. The moment I stopped choosing quiet, everything became clear. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. Who I was in that house. What I was owed. What I no longer owed anyone in return. If you are listening to this from somewhere across this country on a quiet evening, from a house that is yours in name but no longer feels like it, I want you to know something simple. You are allowed to take up your full space. You are allowed to be the voice in the room and the name on the door. You are allowed to choose peace not because you have given up, but because you have finally decided you deserve it. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are simply clarity, and saying no at the right moment does not destroy families. It shows them, and everyone else, exactly what they are made of. I would like to hear from you now. What did you carry away from this story? And what city are you watching from tonight?